Welcome to Still Growing in Grace, a program dedicated to inspiring joy, giving hope, and delighting in grace. I'm Mike Zenker, and I'll be sharing with you a message of hope that will expand your understanding of God's love and amazing grace. God already deeply loves you, totally accepts you, and really, really likes you. Growing in Grace Ministries Canada and Hope Fellowship, your community church, invite you to enjoy today's program as we dig deeper into what it means to be still growing in grace. Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Still Growing in Grace. I hope that whenever you tune into this program, either live or watching later, that you find encouragement. I hope that you're inspired. I hope that you hear good news or more hope-filled perspective on the topics we tend to talk about. Before I get into today's topic, I want to give a shout out to my friend who has just passed away, Paul Gray. Paul Gray has been part of our program since I began doing this Still Growing in Grace. He's become a really good friend over the years. Recently, he ended up in hospital with some lung issues and suddenly passed away. And so my heart goes out to Kitsy, his wife, and the hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of people that have gotten to know Paul, who to me emulated grace personified, Jesus personified. And man, I'm going to miss him. I had really hoped to have him part of our next conference. In fact, the next two conferences that we're going to be, that are in the plans. And it's just heart-wrenching because he was just somebody I could go to for a quick conversation. Hey, what about this? What about that? What do you think? Or, hey, I'm having a rotten day. It's okay, Mike. The light of Christ is in you. And he wasn't goofy. He was real. So everything about him was authentic. And so he wasn't just, putting up a story or giving you a line. When he gave you encouragement, it was real. So I like that. I don't like canned encouragement. I can't stand it. Throw a Bible verse at you here and assume that is encouraging people. It's not. The heart, the relationship, that's what does it. So gonna miss you, Paul. And I think Kitsy posted on, I'm not sure where, either on his personal or the Paul Gray Grace to All. But there's an obituary listing there, and you can go and take a look and leave a condolence if you knew him and were encouraged at all by him. Leave a condolence there. I think his celebration of life is going to be October 15th. That's if I remember correctly. All right, today, the last couple of weeks, I've had Richard Murray on because Bill wasn't available. And we've done some conversations on evangelism, on the idea of Mars Hill and Paul talking to people who don't believe in God. And in fact, they believe in many gods, and how he addressed the topic of this unknown God without lambasting everybody else for their faulty beliefs. It wasn't the, hammer over the head, you're wrong, I'm right. He came at this with a totally more beautiful perspective. And the last couple of weeks recording these sessions really helps me see that and how important it is for us as believers to rethink this evangelism thing. I think there's a ton of myths surrounding it, which includes the word saved and salvation and what it could mean. So today's and next week is the last one we're doing on this topic. We're going to dive into this. What does sharing our faith mean in a more loving way? What about this word saved, and why are we having a hard time with it? And I think when we understand there's a faulty understanding of what this word or these words mean that causes really unhealthy understandings of evangelism and adding fear into people's lives, I think you're going to love this conversation. So today it's Richard and Bill together with me as we have this conversation. Just join in and enjoy. I'm watching live and listening live with you right now. And so the last time I heard this conversation was when we recorded it. So it's going to be fresh. It always is. So I think you're going to love it. Here we go. All right. It's been a while since the three of us have been together. Summer's been busy. So yay, we finally get to have a conversation and continue some of our other conversations. So thanks for being here, Bill and Richard. Welcome.
Hello.
Yay. Remind us what cities you're in.
I'm outside of Atlanta. Oh, sorry. We both waited on each other. I'm outside Atlanta, Metro Atlanta. I live in Woodstock, Georgia.
Okay.
And I'm in a city not built with hands. No, I'm just joking. Trying to be spiritual. No, I'm in Dalton, and it is built with hands.
Yep. And where's Dalton?
Dalton is about 20 minutes south of Chattanooga. It's over the Georgia line, so I'm technically in Georgia, but I hang out and live out in Chattanooga. That's my favorite cities.
All right.
Sometimes so I'm trying to come there someday. Both. It's tons of stuff to see.
Good.
It's play.
I got to figure out how many hours it takes to drive, because I would probably drive down unless it's a cheap flight somewhere. So, yeah, who knows?
Well, those don't exist right now.
What's that?
Those cheap flights don't exist right now.
No, it's not. Still not a good time. The last two conversations Richard and I had, we were talking about this idea of, I called it evangelism, but Richard was talking about the conversation that Paul had when he spoke in Mars Hill, when they saw an altar to an unknown God. Mm-hmm. And so that conversation was really good. I got some really positive feedback. And I wanted to just keep going with that, because the idea of the gospel, what is the gospel, came into this. I thought, well, what would he have said? What would he have said the gospel is? And I thought, let's talk about that a little bit, because there's a couple spinoffs. And I know, Richard, you had an epiphany story you want to tell us. So that's kind of where I'm hoping to go. And Bill, if you've got to leave, you got to leave. But man, I think this could be a lot of fun.
Well, I was looking, trying to find the particular passage that I was talking about. It's in a book that I wrote called The Jesus Mood. And basically, I was having a shower, and this just hit me when I don't know about y'all, but I get some of the best revelation ever when you're in the shower.
Me too. Driving.
Yeah.
You're not in there long enough.
Well, yeah, and it's like that some mornings. But some mornings when you're taking your time, you start thinking about stuff, and you're cleaning, and you're getting clean on the inside and the outside. But anyhow, to explain the gospel, Jesus said the reason that he came in Luke 4 was to preach deliverance to the captives, recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those that are bruised, and to preach the acceptable year of the Lord. Well, I mean, there's nothing but good news in that, which is obviously what gospel means. But what I saw the other day, particularly when we talk about things like universalism and things like that, is and grace, all these streams of teaching that talk about it already being done, the finished work of Christ. It is finished. It's been done. He won't do anything more to save you than he's already done. So, I've been thinking about how do we make that a gospel? Because what you always hear is, well, if it's already been done, why do we do anything? Let's just sit here and wait. We're there. But there was something in the Lord's Prayer that and in other places where Jesus talks about praying that heaven's will be done on earth as it already is in heaven. And in fact, that passage where he says, whatsoever things you bind on earth shall be having already been bound in heaven. That's the Greek of that. It's mistranslated a lot of places. But there seems to be a line of thought throughout the Gospels that what is in heaven has been complete. That in heaven, everything has already been done, including our salvation, including our sanctification, including our glorification. Because think about this as a noodle baker. If we're outside of eternity, if we're outside of eternity now, but when we enter eternity, into the fullness of eternity, then we've always already been. We're there now. We're there having spiritual beers now together, all three of us. All right.
I bet you'll be good.
And yes, yeah. And when you have that idea of it, then the concept is not then the gospel becomes a revelation of that. It becomes a revelation of chains being set free. You've been all he is. He came to tell you, I've come to set you free. I have set you free. You are eternally set free. The question, though, is when do we realize it? How do we recognize it? To recognize it and to realize it is to then, that is the core of the gospel.
That activates it too then, right?
That activate. It's all a matter of activation. And what is it we're to pray every day? That your will be done on earth as it's already been done in heaven. And that was the epiphany that I had in the shower. Oh my God. Then that just means that we're here telling people, we're sharing a gospel, a completed gospel. You may not feel saved. You may not even know what saved is. You may have no recognition that you're saved, but you know what? In heaven, you are saved. Mm-hmm. And as you accept this truth and let this truth percolate, and like that mustard seed, as you let it grow within you, then you become to the realization of what you already are and what you already have always been. And that's putting the maximum impact on Jesus's salvific, is that how you say it?
Salvific,
work.
Yeah.
The idea that because anything more than that is a work. We're preaching works. You've got to do this. You got to believe this exact thing.
Right.
You've got to do this exact thing. You've got to go through this protocol. I don't know about you, but every time someone gives me protocols, spiritual protocols, you just feel the spirit quench. But then when the spirit's percolating in you, you don't need protocols. I mean, intuitively where goodness is, and it's a done deal. We're tapping into the done dealness of God. How about that for a gospel definition? The done dealness. But I got so excited about that because we often get criticized. With regard to salvation, universalism. Why do we preach the gospel? Why would you even preach it if we're already saved? Because you don't know you're saved. You already don't recognize you're saved. How beautiful are the feet of the ones who share the gospel, because we get to tell people what Jesus has already done. All right. We're not speaking from ourselves or of ourselves, but we're speaking from and of what he's done and what he's communicated through us, through our spirits. So
I'll bet your motivation has something to do with it too, then.
Yes. And and who wouldn't? But the whole point is the gospel that's being preached today is a gospel that you aren't saved, instead of the gospel that you are saved.
Yeah.
So we need to take that bull by the delicious horns and just say, yes, you are saved. I don't care how evil you appear. I don't care that you spit at Jesus with the last spittle, on your last dying moment and your last dying day. What's going to happen in eternity is that if you haven't recognized you're so great a salvation, then when you enter into eternity, the Lord's going to take you on a walkabout. That's what I've called it that many times. It's a cosmic walkabout. He'll show you how you've been saved. He'll show you where you've been misguided and how you looked the other way when he was trying to reach you, and all the episodes we've had in our life. It's going to be a glorious thing. That's what my experience at Toronto was like. He took me on a little walkabout and showed me where he'd always been, and that he'd always been there for me. And nothing makes you feel better than when you truly discover that the Lord was with you the entire time in the very midst of your pain and torment. And it's just magnificent. And so this gospel, I think we can polish. I don't want to polish it up too much. I don't know if you ever saw that old Andy Griffith episode where the guy that's everything he does is cursed. It's Barney's cousin, I think. And so he's trying to really impress everybody. So he shines the keys to the gates, but he shines them so hard, he ruins them and they don't work in the lock anymore. So he thinks he's living under a curse, but the whole thing is about to get it broken. But so what I'm saying is I don't want to polish the keys up too much with doctrine and with other things. This is more, we got to keep it a little free flowing there and a little organic. I don't have all the answers to all the things of why things happen the way that I do, but more and more, you can't deny that the salvation that Jesus taught, and the only thing he ever said is just believe it. When you believe, it's just believing this ready recognition, submitting to it, and then following the implications of it, where it naturally causes you to want to grow, like a plant leaning towards the sun. Once we receive that mustard seed and it grows, our whole posture starts leaning towards that reality, of the glorious grace. So I know I'm going on long, but that was the epiphany.
That's cool. Bill.
So, yeah, I think, the gospel, if you want to just kind of go as tight as you can, the good news. How would I describe it? How did Paul what would Paul say? I think if he had to summarize it, maybe this is oversimplification, but I'm not sure it is, or at least the Pauline apostles who wrote Hebrews. I think I wrote down just 5 things here. And this is the summary, like progressive summary. God, okay, define God just in the broadest sense, the creator of the cosmos who holds all things together. right? We're good with that. Whatever you want to define, whatever was the first cause for all that exists, that entity looks exactly like Jesus. To take it one level beyond, what does Jesus in his essence or his simplicity most represent? Well, Jesus is a figure who shows us that God desires mercy over sacrifice, right? What was Jesus' mission? You said it, Richard, but even just to simplify it one layer, he came to save, sozos, we can talk about that, restore, find, bring home that which was lost. Jesus finished his mission completely. God looks exactly like Jesus. That's it. That's the gospel in a nutshell, like super, super compact, right? And I don't know that there's anything inside of that should give anyone sense of dread and only inspire hope and those fruits of the Spirit, right? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control.
Amen.
So Jesus didn't come to, make you feel like crap and tell you how bad you are,
Well,
so that you'll maybe listen to him.
I've read the Gospels pretty thoroughly, and I don't find Jesus making anyone who was quote unquote defined as a sinner feel like crap. The only people he seemed to rebuke and kind of call out were the self-righteous people who made others feel that way.
So the good news then has to be good news, or it's not good news. I know that sounds simplistic.
Not good news for everybody, then it's not good news, right?
Yeah.
Right. But if we're honest, in the world I grew up in, it was only good news to the in group.
to
Those
the
who
elect.
said, well, what if you want to use that word. Right. Yeah. But people think like that. So why would people be so upset with this idea of Jesus has already done this? Because I think in my mind, there's three tenses of the word saved.
Yep.
There is everyone is saved. There's evidence in scripture for that. There's evidence that all are being saved. And then there's more evidence of all will be saved. So all three are equally true. And yet somebody wants to take one of them and just sit there.
And I'll even spin it slightly different how I've described it. I think there's three, especially when we're approaching scripture, three ways that salvation needs to be considered depending on the context that's being used specifically to scripture. There is a literal salvation that occurred to a very specific group of people that has application scripturally, that there were, according to even Josephus, a non-biblical scholar, who talked about that everyone who fled the city of Jerusalem literally had their life spared. There was a literal saving that happened to a Jewish community who heard the words of message. And
it wasn't just physical. It wasn't just spiritual. It was physical. There
were some physical applications to salvation, rescue, that were real for that generation of people. And the Roman Empire and things going on. There is a subjective medium of salvation that we can still participate in today, which is the recognition of what I just said, that I no longer believe God looks like Molech or Ra or the Old Testament Jewish God, who wants sacrifice over mercy. Now all of a sudden I flip the script and God looks like Jesus. And through that subjective revelation, I get to experience life through a much better filter. And then there's an objective salvation, which is the finished work of Christ on the cross, which is, I think, what you're talking, Mike, that all will be saved, all are saved, and all are being saved, right? So I think all three of yours are a very objective term, but there's a subjective element to this that I think confuses people, and that's probably the one that's the most challenging. And then the literal part, scripturally, I find interesting because so many of them, when you apply that to actually what's being said, you go, that actually makes more sense a lot of times just from a raw scriptural standpoint for certain passages. You're like, maybe they were actually talking about not perishing, which is, again, John 3:16 is in reference to not perishing. That we're not talking about eternal conscious torment, I don't think, in that sentence. I think Jesus is talking to a Pharisee, and he's kind of being really serious about what's going to happen, in the wake of his his death and the subsequent fall of the entire Jewish system within one generation of people.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty.
Yeah, I think some of it too is when we hear words like perish, you know, I don't know about y'all, but I'll be the first to admit that I operate out of a false identity.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not myself. And you know, sometimes it's at work, sometimes it's when I'm in wrathful, sometimes it's when I'm impatient and I'm in road rage or whatever you want to call it. I know that I have mindsets that are horrible, whether we want to call them demonic, whether we want to call them carnal, who cares what we call them? They are there, they are ugly, and they are not us.
Yeah.
So and I think a lot of people, someone who refuses to see, you know, refuses to hear the whispers of the Spirit and to see the goodness that's all around us, just pulsating if we have eyes to see. But when we don't have eyes to see, you know, Hebrews has this line: how shall we escape? And the context of that is in the evils of the world. How shall we escape if we neglect our so great a salvation? So to me, that is the only sin that we all, and we might call whatever not of faith a sin. All that's talking about is tapping into eternity. When we tap into eternity, and when we widen and we let eternity grow in us, and we're already fully grown. Some part of us is already fully grown. That's the real us. And to the extent that Jesus might ever imply that something perishes, it's that part of us that is false. It's the false identity, the false mask that's grafted itself falsely. It's an illegitimate branch that's going to be burned off. Praise God, it's going to be burned off. But you know what? It's preferable. The sooner the better. That's why I tell anyone about the gospel. Why should you take the gospel if we're going to be saved ultimately? Well, the sooner the better, dear Lord. Who wouldn't want to know their eternal destiny and feel the limitless love of God at the highest gasoline percentage of purity that there is, the highest level of fuel there is? This Jesus is high octane spirit. He is high octane power, high octane curative energy.
Dynamo.
You know, who wouldn't want to tap into that?
Rocket fuel.
Yeah, and what even makes it more tragic in a way, well, I don't like that. Not tragic, but just unfortunate, is that to know that because of your mindset is one that obstructs your recognition of your so great a salvation. And, you know, it's a mindset. It can be bitterness. It could be anything. It can be pride. It could be carnality. It can be anything. But the point is that when we just let this idea germinate within us, it becomes a pulsating living thing, and it takes us into places, organic places, and fluid protein. I've shared that word with you. I love that word. It's the cell thing, and it just means it's continually to evolve and change shapes. It's fluid. It goes with us, and that's the way the Lord is with us, isn't it? I mean, everything we do, He doesn't say, "Oh, you took a right there. I'm over here on the left." He goes right with you. He goes left with you. You know, He's continually, whatever choices we make, He's interacting with them, and wherever we go, He's just always malleable and working with us and through us. And there's this energy that I'd like to call plenitude. That's just a word that describes it. But plenitude means fullness. And it is it's part of the ancient thinkers would say plenitude. It's more than optimism, because, you know, optimism sees the glass half full, pessimism sees it half empty. Plenitude, it overflows. It doesn't pretend, because an optimist is always pretending it's half full. Plenitude actually sees the eternity in that glass and sees that it's overflowing. So we have, and listen, I'm not telling you I'm walking in this all the time, but I know I've dipped my toe in it enough to know that it's there, and that it changes everything. And when we have a changed perspective, and a perspective of light, which is really what the gospel is, it's a perspective of light only in Him, which, again, you get back to the gospel, John's thing that he said about it. This is the message, the gospel. This is the message that we have heard from Jesus from the beginning, and now preach unto you that God is light, and in Him is no darkness at all.
Yep.
And
at all.
Man, that's it. When we have that, that is the gospel. That's how John described it. You know, so when we talk about that, then we shouldn't be preaching darkness. And the reason so many people preach darkness is because they're into dualistic thinking. Well, what about that? If Jesus has come to save us, well, what about those who don't want to be saved? Or what about those who reject it? Well, the answer is you can't reject it. You can delay it. All you can do is delay it. You can go kicking and screaming and you can delay it, but sooner or later, his beauty is going to get you. You can't dodge out of it. You can resist it. Go ahead. Take your swing. Go for the fence. Swing as hard as you can in eternity to ignore and deny him and the beauty and the relentless perfection that he is.
And that'll burn off.
I mean, just try it. And you can't do it. And that's why I will never believe that anyone can outmaneuver God. Ever. You know, you can't outmaneuver Jesus. It just can't be done. You can, like I say, you can postpone it or delay it. But so we're just here saying, why delay? What the delay is. Hey, I'm here to share with you about things that might be delaying your recognition of your so great a salvation. So it's all a question of how each person deals with their own so great a salvation. That's what the gospel is, a revelation.
And that's that subjective walk that each one of us that is unique, that is beautiful, that is creative, right? I mean, that's what if you get in that whole quantum thing, and I'm not going to go there, but that's what brings forth creation itself. That's always on the fringe of that eternity, as it is in heaven, bringing it into actuality. Jesus said, I only do what I see the Father doing, or it might even be better said, what the Father has done, right? Because it's complete, right? So he was already seeing the finished work of the Father and bringing it into
Amen.
The infinite now, right? And we have the same power. I mean, Jesus was pretty clear that we have the same power, that if we can tap into that plenitude, that fullness, that overflowing abundance of life, light, and love that is always on the threshold, if we have the mustard seed of faith to believe it true, and we can draw it into the now.
And even that mustard seed is a gift. Even that speck is a gift. You can't muster it up.
No, and I think that's, and sometimes that doesn't mean we are literally, I think, Jesus was pretty interesting with his parables and allegories and moving mountains. But, that mountain that moves may be so small in the context of what we conceive, but it has a ripple effect. It's that butterfly effect. One little flap here, and literally millions of lives are changed somewhere in the connectedness of this thing that is God and the unseen God. To go back to the Mars Hill reference, right?
I like the Mars. Last week when you talked about the contrast of Paul didn't come in there making a list, an apologetics debate of what was wrong with all the other faiths. Somebody else caught that last week and commented, and that kind of startled us in a way. It shouldn't, but just to be reminded and focus on that part again. Sometimes we're trying to convince others of faith. I had somebody text me the other day, hey, I got a family that's got all these ideas in their head and I don't agree with them, and they're going down this nasty track. And I said, you're never going to convince them. You can't. Don't even address it. You just be loving, be light, be kind. And that's what Paul did. Paul went in, hey, I'm going to tell you about this. And all he could do was share his story, share the gospel, and didn't have to defend, which is bizarre. We're so set up for defending, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and that gets back to that dualistic thought, because there's a trigger in it. It's like when somebody, I don't know about y'all, but I've had this when somebody shares a healing, or even when I share healing, somebody's first talking to me, why didn't they heal me? Why would they heal you? Do I not have faith? And we seem to have a trigger reaction in our carnal mind.
Why?
And whenever we hear a positive, we immediately go negative. And yet, so when we say God is light and only no darkness, it's not talking about, you're not even, it's a light that isn't contrasted with darkness. There is no darkness. All right. There's no shadow of turning in him. So when we preach, Jesus comes and says, well, I'm here to preach, freedom to the captives and recovering of sight to the blind. Well, are you saying I'm blind? Are you saying this? I mean, you go the opposite way with it, and our minds just want to go there. They get offended. They get offended at our so great a salvation. All right. Now, I don't have, am I qualified, nor do I want to even bear the responsibility of having all the answers to all the questions about evil. But I know this, Philippians says we're to always focus on whatever things are good, true, praiseworthy, of good report. Think on these things. And do not let this dualistic image, well, if I'm not feeling God's presence today, or something happens, then I'm now in darkness, and I'm under wrath. I mean, all those things are rabbit trails that divert from the beauty of the gospel. Because then it would be mixed news. It's not, well, I don't know what the Greek word is for God. I know what it is for gospel, is good news. I mean, gospel means good news, but what is it for very, very dualistic news or very, very black and white news? I'm preaching a salvation. If my salvation I'm preaching is only for some of you, ultimately only for some of you, then it's not good news to everyone who hears it and doesn't experience it or doesn't recognize it. So anyway, I mean, we need to, I'm not going to the dark spots. I'm not going to explain why darkness here or what it is or what's going to, I mean, some people, even the philosophers, believe evil is just privation. It's just an absence of being, and I think we don't even need to dwell on that. We just dwell on the goodness of God, and that leavens into our thinking and into our emotions.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
So how would you sum up this, what is the gospel, compared to what we have heard the gospel to be in a dualistic sense? Do Bill, this would be a good one for you to address, because there's a contrast, and sometimes people don't understand things until they hear the extreme contrast.
Yeah, I mean, just as simply as I could put it, I think Richard nailed it, but just to give it a little more contrast is the message I was taught, and I think the message so many of us have been taught is that God is both light and dark. There's some shadows that we can't understand. And the good news is there is no shadows with God. The shadows that we had in the Old Testament, as Paul says, have been, vanquished in the light of Christ. Mm-hmm. Right. And most perfectly displayed Christ crucified, right, and resurrected. So again, I can't go anything more than God looks exactly like Jesus. And that is the most enlightening, literally, mindset recognition that we can have. And in that, the spirit of that same Christ who lives in us will start to blossom, right, and overflow those same spiritual attributes that he displayed out of our own being and start to cast out our own shadows of identity, of behavior, of anything else, slowly, gently, patiently, right? All those good things, he starts to overwhelm our own essence with his own light. Love that.
We're going to do our next conversation on beginning with the motive of the gospel, of how we share. So we're going to start the next part with that. So thank you for being part of this one. I look forward to the next conversation, and we'll catch you next time. That was fun. Oh man, that was good. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. And we have one more part next week, and Richard and I will finish up that conversation then. I hope this triggered some thinking. I hope this expanded some of our understanding of what some of these terms mean. I think there's more going on than what we have been told. I value my background. I value the church I grew up in. In fact, for a long time, I didn't. I said, oh my goodness, that was so wrong what I grew up in. I grew up in such great legalism. And I became almost venomous towards that and anyone associated with it, as in, I'm right, they're wrong. And then I realized, wait a minute, that is not the heart of Christ. And I began to see the value. And again, I learned a lot of this through the journey of forgiveness from my own mother, which is another show altogether, or two. But the idea of acknowledging the good, because my German Baptist background was what God used. That was my path, my journey of how I came to faith. And I love what William Paul Young, author of The Shack, often says. He calls them my people. I thought, yeah, we're still identifying instead of I'm not part of that group, because we do that, don't we? We'll say, oh no, I'm nothing like those charismatics. Oh, I'm nothing like those Anglicans. Oh, I'm nothing like those Catholics. And you try to separate yourself from them, but we're actually connected. So maybe we need to not be so quick to create new dualism, right versus wrong tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right and wrong. We got to stop eating from that tree and eat from the life tree that's already in us. Something to ponder, that's all. Wherever that takes you, I think there's much to learn on that, and it will change the tone of our discussions, and arguments will lessen because nobody's fighting to be right, and that's a different thing. All right, let's say hello to some folks that are watching. Catherine, good morning here in Elmira. Buddy Fisher of Men, tell me who you are again. I think I kind of remember. Is it Indiana you're from? I'm not sure. I forget your real name. That'd be nice to hear too. He says dualism is what's taught here in America for the most part. Well, it's taught all around the world too, because it ended up being Americans and Canadians and the mission fields and all that stuff that just got spread around the world. But it wasn't just there. Other faiths have them too, other denominations, but it's a real hindrance. In fact, Baxter Kruger talks about that. It's the greatest log. I think he said there's two major logs clogging the dam of freedom and life, the river of life, and dualism is one of them, and separation. So yeah, that's a great conversation. I'll have to find where that conversation is. John Sanders, good morning. Hey, John, where are you located? I've seen you on here several times. I just can't remember where you're at. Howard in Sorrento, BC, good morning. And Jen Nye, I think you're in Paris, Ontario. Yeah, this is a great topic. Wait till you hear next week's. If you didn't hear the last two, go back and listen. They're really good. And then next one, we finish up. So I know I called it evangelism, myths, and thoughts, but really, we talked about Mars Hill, then we talked about today, what is the gospel, and next week we continue with that, what saved and salvation means and all that. I actually forget what next week will be, but it was such a great conversation. So, all right, I hope you guys have a great week. Join us Sunday morning, Hope Fellowship, a small church here in Southern Ontario. We go live every Sunday morning, 9:55 a.m., We got a 10-minute countdown, so you have time to go get your coffee and confirm. Okay, you're in South Carolina, John. That's awesome. Yay. Kelvin, good morning. Where are you from? I see a flag, but I don't recognize it because I can't Google it fast enough. Anyway, join us Sunday mornings. If you can't join us live, Sunday mornings is different. It's like a more of a traditional church setting, but the message is not traditional. I want to give hope and inspire and challenge and question some of the traditional teachings in a safe place, to a group of people that are learning and growing. And so in this thing that we do Wednesday mornings, I can go deeper and faster because it's just a couple people having a dialogue. But on a Sunday, it's a slower pace because people need more time to process. More people show up that may not be on the journey yet or are early in the journey and still have questions, and we need to be careful to not rush ahead of anyone. And I love this kind of pastoring, this kind of sharing, and I hope you guys value it too. So anyway, look forward to that. We'll catch you guys next time. Hope you have a great week. See you then. Join me next time on Still Growing in Grace for more good news. Enjoy previous episodes by downloading our podcast at growingingrace.ca. You can also visit hopefellowshipycc.com to find our service times and location. If this show has been an encouragement to you, please consider making a donation today at growingingrace.ca and help us keep spreading this good news. Thank you again for tuning in to Still Growing in Grace.